Hello, hello, hello. Perfection. Thank you, love. Okay. Let me get everything set up. Just still trying to struggle with it. Sorry, everybody. Good morning.
Hey.
Can you hear me?
I want to, if I may, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to remind you as my friend, because it's really important. We're running across, especially those from the South, Indigenous peoples from the South who are disconnected. I've been running across a lot of reconnecting or disconnected Indigenous peoples who have valid Indigenous ancestry, who have been very nervous based on the waters on TikTok and everybody saying you have to know your culture or be seeking to do it exactly as your ancestors did, or else you don't count, and you better not say you're Indigenous. And and it's not you that's saying that. Obviously, you throw that caveat in there, but if we could throw some emphasis in there that those who have been forcibly disconnected from their heritage, and it's not even those of us who are connected who are doing it, because we have open arms, right? It's the newly reconnecting who are really like that. And I think maybe they're doing it because maybe they want to feel more connected, like it may somehow having some sort of position of leadership or say so makes them, because that's a lot, they had their heritage taken from them, and now they don't have any control over that, and they themselves feel separated. They want to be able to gatekeep themselves to feel accepted. Yeah. And I just, as a connected Indigenous person, I really want there to be a strong focus on the open arms of those who've been forcibly disconnected.
100. And that is something that I have planned on starting us with, actually. So I'm glad that you did, because I do see a lot of that. I know a lot of people who are absolutely Indigenous. You can tell looking at them, they're Indigenous AF, but people are like, well, you're not Indigenous because you're not connected, or you're not a part of this nation, or who claims you. And it's like, you got to understand that colonization means that there are many people here within the United States and Canada, south of that border, that may not have that direct link, or their tribe may be completely gone as a nation, who are still Indigenous, and that is absolutely something we see so much coming across lately, that it is actually one of the things that I wanted to start with. And I have definitely also tried to make sure in some of the different
is this Tonto able to, no, he's 10 followers, 82 follow. Can I address him real quick?
Absolutely.
Tonto, if you're referring to me, I don't have a Northern European phenotype. I have pale skin. My tribe is pale. Not as pale as me, because I am mixed. But only 3 of my grandparents were not Indigenous. Only 3 of my grandparents were Indigenous. Only 1 was not. So my grandfather he was a German Jew. But as far as those of us who are mixed, we're still valid. There seems to be a stereotype, a Hollywood stereotype, that says, okay, we have to fit this particular stereotype. And here's the thing, from tribe to tribe, we do have different noses, we have different chins, we have different eyes, we have different, like the epicanthal eye fold is very common, right? But not all of us have it. And we have it to varying degrees. Okay, so I don't know what Pocahontas syndrome, what the heck?
Well, the name itself is so problematic to me. What?
That's,
not only are you tokenizing within your name, but you're contributing to the MMIW problem that we have within your name, Tonto. So before you start correcting other people by their skin color, maybe you should check your name and check what you're doing to try and forward our community and work for our community. And until then,
Like,
maybe you should check that.
I wish we had like a genuinely just European person to like put side by side with me, like so you can compare the facial features. Because in fact, or like perhaps another Pawnee person, can you please hop up here? We could start, sharing the nose, the eyes, the chin, because I do look like my people.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, Tonto, I think you're speaking from a position of lack of education. Just because you don't know what my tribe looks like, just because you have a problem with breeding or blood quantum. I think 3 grandparents being Indigenous is plenty enough. I think 1 grandparent being Indigenous is enough. I think a great grandparent being Indigenous is enough. I think you need to take a step back. I have done a DNA, and I know my family. So I'm enrolled, so I don't know how well you want. Like, this is getting that's ridiculous.
They're done. That was ridiculous. Anyways, they're done. And the name itself is very problematic for me. The name itself just has so much of the tokenization within it. And then, we're dealing with such a crisis with MMIW, and to kind of tokenize and use something that's so sexually explicit within that is very problematic to me. So you can take yourself somewhere else. It's obviously not the live for you.
And at the end of the day, like they can screw with me, and that's easy for me to dispel because of my connection, right?
Yeah.
But there are validly Indigenous people who may not be enrolled, and they're Indigenous, and they're valid, and they're counted amongst our numbers as far as we're concerned. They're our people. Like, for instance, the Southern Indigenous folks, those are valid Indigenous peoples. And regardless of their admixture of any other ethnicity, they claim and are well connected to their people. And I want to emphasize, just because they're detribalized does not mean that they're not connected to their culture. You can see many echoes, no matter how far out you think that they're disconnected. Trust me, you can see the echoes of their ancestors within the way that they live day to day.
Well, I think that that's important to recognize that connection doesn't necessarily have to be to a nation. Connection can be to your heritage, to your ancestry, to the land itself, and to trying to uplift that and to support, and to bring that back. Yeah, there's a lot. And that's one of the issues that I have and that I see a lot around here, or a lot on TikTok especially, is that kind of erasing and devaluing the experience that comes from south of that imposed border. It's not our border. It's not a border that we put in place. And the south of that imposed border, having that, being colonized by 2 different groups of people means that we have 2 different experiences. And the way that the Spanish colonized versus the way that the English colonized are completely different ways of colonization. And so we have to understand that because this is the experience maybe in the US or Canada does not mean that it's the experience in Mexico. But that does not invalidate the indigeneity or invalidate the connection of the people south of that imposed border.
It's if you stop and think about it, how long has that border been there? And how long have we been here? They created treaties with us, right? Meaning that we're sovereign nations. Okay, we are sovereign nations. We still exist. We're still valid. Okay, and at the end of the day, what's right is right, and what's going to happen is going to happen. But those borders, realistically, are not going to stay exactly the same. 1,000 years from now, they're going to be different. And 1,000 years from then, they'll be different. And in another 1,000, it's going to change, okay? And we need to respect the Indigenous peoples of that land, regardless. When you draw borders and you separate literally families, you can't say you are now no longer related. I mean, that's insane.
Absolutely. I like to point out to people that the Dene language group, which means the root of the Dene language and the languages that come from the Dene language root, actually stems from the southern tip of Mexico up into the Great Plains, and then starts again at the northern part of California and stretches almost all the way up to Alaska. This is all the same language group. So they are all coming from the same groups initially, spreading out, of course, and becoming individual cultures and becoming individual groups. But they still have that connection when you go far enough back. So you're looking at peoples whose families are separated. When that border comes into place, there are actually nations who are divided in that border place. And people like to that border, but that border has only been here like 150 years. Like that in the place that it's been in now is relatively recent, right? So you're right. In 100 more years, that border is going to be in a whole different place if it's still there. Like that border has always changed and fluctuated since the start of the European colonization and since the start of them putting that border up. So the idea that that border really has anything to do with somebody's indigeneity is really a false equivocation.
It is. It absolutely is. It's upsetting for me because we really do kind of have an emergency. Not kind of, we do have an emergency. What's happening at the border with the children? Okay, listen, let's set aside to the adults is messed up too, but doubly messed up is what's happening to the kids and the fact that they're being separated from their families and they're being sent out to families, if they even get to go to a family at all, that are not of their people, and they're being disconnected from their culture and their people, their families, and that's wrong. That is an MMIWC situation. And you see how that border completely negated ICWA, even if it stays, isn't applying to these children, and it really should. It's horrifying. And now we have ICWA being challenged. We're right on the precipice of that being not completely out of the water. We've got a disproportionate number of Indigenous children in the foster care system, and they're being placed in places that they shouldn't be placed in. I know how ICWA works intimately because it applied to me when I was in foster care myself, and I was very lucky. It is genocidal. If you look, I read up on ICWA because I was wondering if it was the lady referring to her baby as Pancake Baby that started it. And she's like one of them, but like the main family is not that family. Apparently it's a family with a 10-year-old.
I saw that.
And here's what it really sent alarm bells off. It added insult to injury that it was an evangelical Christian family. And they stated that they would their end all be all for why they want to keep this child is because they say that they are evangelicals, so therefore they could take better care of this child. So they literally put on the table the fact that they are a different culture, so therefore they're better qualified to care for this child. Does that not upset everyone?
Absolutely. And it should.
It should, because our culture is valid. That's literally saying our culture is less capable of caring for children than an evangelical Christian family. And I am Christian. I'm not evangelical. I'm a mind your own business, non-denominational academic type of Christian. I don't believe in evangelical Christianity. I don't believe in hate. I don't know what Jesus they're praying to, but my Jesus had melanin, and my Jesus accepted everyone and didn't say anything negative about LGBTQI plus, and didn't tell us to go out and be forceful. Yeah. So I don't know. I guess we're different religions, but there's no name for the separation of us.
Absolutely.
But evangelical was invented in the 1940s. It's scary.
Well, I don't consider myself Christian, but I love Jesus. I think Jesus preached love, and I don't think most of the people that preach for him these days preach the same love that he preached. including the evangelical path. I mean, any path that is telling you that you have to be something completely different and trying to completely change things is not teaching Jesus's teachings. Have you seen that? There's a song somebody put out that says Jesus was a trans kid dressing up in robes and curls. It's beautiful. I've got it on my page, and I'm like, oh, this reminded me of why I love him.
This person has a very good point. Like, I mean, if you want to objectively look at it, that's why the Washute kids are pew-pewing up schools, churches, etc. They need to heal their own trauma. Yes, it does, because the things that they're teaching their kids, it objectively are not healthy.
Absolutely. And the displaced and disproportionate amount of hurt and anger that is directed in spaces that it shouldn't be directed to absolutely comes directly from those teachings.
Wow, Pink Monkey, that's not.
Goodbye.
That's not.
See you.
That was a very helpful comment that this person had left. That's why these kids are doing this, and that's objectively, that's a helpful fact to know. I mean, we have a case in the Supreme Court right now where they're saying, oh, because we're evangelical Christians, we're better equipped. So they can take one of two routes. They can either A, say that their way of raising kids is better than ours, or B, they can say, oh, because we get more money because we're evangelical Christians, which means basically you beg for money.
Yeah. And that's real. And totally against the teachings of Christ. Render unto Caesar what is Caesar's.
Like, and evade tax. So therefore you have more resources. So like, which argument are you taking here? Neither is appropriate for rearing children, as far as I'm concerned.
I agree.
If a family needs help, that's fine, but like, they're literally saying that they're wealthy because of it. So at least that's what I'm extrapolating from this. And I don't think that's a stretch. I'm not trying to stretch. I'm just saying that's what they said.
Well, and my understanding is they actually won their case. So they actually have adopted formally the child involved. And yet they're still fighting to overturn ICWA. Like, they're already got what they wanted out of the deal. They are already controlling a child's life. They have already disconnected a child from their people and their culture. And yet they want to disconnect more.
And the fact of the matter is that once a child is separated from their culture, when kids are, let's just get real. When I was the Native American foster kid, okay? And the reason I got enrolled, the whole reason I got enrolled was because the way that I was being treated was racist. There were a lot of microaggressions being said around me that were very disturbing to me as a young teen girl. And as a young teen Indigenous girl, I told my older sister, who was a young adult at the time, and she lost her shit. And she said, no, you're dealing with an Indigenous child. You can't do this. And she contacted the tribe, made sure that the social worker got in contact with the tribe. They got me enrolled. They're like, no, she's Indigenous. She's been connected to her tribe, and, that's racist. And they were able to do it, but they did it begrudgingly, right? Indigenous kids do get disrespected in foster care. It's, and they'll say, oh, no, there are good families and there are bad families. No, if you are not one of us, you don't have the love for our culture. Otherwise, you would have found a way to be one of us. You know what I mean? Through some sort of connection to the culture. You know what I mean? There are plenty of people who are not Indigenous, who are either married into an Indigenous family, or they have so many friends, they do come and attend certain powwows and things like that. A lot of people are invited to powwows who aren't Indigenous, and that's fine. So, like, if these people really did appreciate our culture, they would be involved with our culture to some degree.
Yeah, that's real. Well, and I
respectfully.
The first person I lived with, I consider him my first husband, though not technically. I didn't have children by him and stuff, and we weren't technically married. I was born in '78. He was 6 years older than me. And so he entered into the foster care system before ICWA came into place. He was taken from his home and put in the foster care system very young. And he was horrifically abused within the foster care system. And it was only after ICWA was put into place that he was able to be removed from the foster care system and to be placed back with his people. There is so much trauma that happened prior to ICWA, so much trauma that was done to Indigenous children. Most Indigenous children were not taken to, and some were, but many were not taken to homes that treated them with love. Many were not taken to homes that treated them with respect. Many were taken to homes that treated them as servants or as something to harm, something to take your aggression out on or your mixed up head out on. And the damage that was done before ICWA was in place, when we had children being put into frankly racist homes half the time, right, that did not see them as children or human, but saw them as something to be adjusted, to save, to whatever. The trauma was very real and very heavy and very hard. And ICWA is extremely important for experiences like yours and experience like his. These things are what have actually created an environment for many of our people to heal, right? As long as we are continuously suffering the abuses that were imposed by the residential schools, by the 60s swoops, by pre-ICWA foster care, as long as we were continuing to suffer those abuses, we were passing those abuses down because it's, the trauma within us. And it is only in being able to pull out of those traumatic spaces and to be able to grow up in spaces that don't have that level of trauma. And I'm not saying that they don't have their own trauma, that we are able to start healing and start recovering from the horrific trauma.
Hang on a second.
Absolutely.
Traditional dancer. I get that we both have pale skin. I'm enrolled. I'm Pawnee. I was born on the reservation, raised in my culture. I'm Pawnee. I have darkest blonde, lightest brown hair. Yeah, my grandfather on my mother's side was German Jewish. So, yeah. No. My eyes are dark brown. I have Pawnee eyes. And all of my facial features match up with my people. I actually looked, and I'm about the same shade as the chief of my tribe right now. A lot of us are mixed. It happens. So I'm involved in my culture, and I am Indigenous. ICWA applied to me when I was a foster kid. That's why she's got me up here. We're talking about what qualifies to be Indigenous.
Exactly, Ghetto. And sometimes it's not from that. Sometimes it's from actual love and acceptance. Most people do not realize that many Indigenous people are very welcoming and loving and adopting of outsiders. Many Europeans were adopted by nations and taken in by nations and loved by nations. Juana Parker is absolutely a prime example of a child who was raised and grew up and then become a part of a nation and had children within a nation. And then when she was stolen back, Juana's mother, when she was stolen back, actually could not handle living in the Western society anymore and actually withered away because of the Western society that she was placed in, being removed from the society that she grew up within that treated her with such love and welcoming. We were just talking a little bit about that, Ghetto. In both of our opinions, being Indigenous to the Turtle Islands does not mean that you are a member of a federally recognized tribe. There are plenty of people who are Indigenous who are not members of or acknowledged or claimed by federally recognized tribes. I personally don't believe that you should claim to be a member of a tribe that isn't going to claim you. Right? Like, I'm not going to go around and say that I'm Lakota, right? I'm not Lakota, right? Yet coming from south of that imposed border does not lessen indigeneity. It changes the way the colonizer played with Indigenous people.
What's up, Nicole? At the end of the day, it is an atrocity that we should all stand against the fact that the Southern tribes have been detribalized. by refusing to accept the validity of the government's stamp and seal of approval. I don't give a fuck what the U.S. government has to say. If you're Indigenous, you're Indigenous. And I'm sorry for cussing on your live. It's an academic live. I shouldn't.
I do it all the time. Personally, they have done studies that proved that people who actually cuss are actually more honest because they're less likely to filter and less likely to change their language to adjust. And for me, part of it is a reclamation as well. Many of the cuss words that we have today actually come from different languages that were brought in. And so I cuss all you want.
It's a profane expletive in response to a profane act.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It is profane what they've done. We have Mexican, Indigenous, and Taino people running around wondering about their validity. Like, that's not right. They're valid, period. Right. There's not a question. This is not up for debate. It's not a debate. They are.
Absolutely.
You know, it got to the point. You know, I grew up in Southern California, and I'll tell you, you know, the Mexican Indigenous folks had a saying. They'd say, "Soy como soy." I am what I am. You know, I don't know how to explain it to you, and I don't need to have to, because I am what I am.
There was a T-shirt and a phrase that was going around probably in 2019 that I fell in love with. I don't use it very often, but it's spicy native. And for me, I think that that's just a beautiful turn of phrase, because really what it is just the colonization from a different area. There's still Indigenous people, right? So it's a colonization with a little bit of spice in it, right? So not that the colonizers brought the spice, but to me, that really, we have to look at Indigenous to the Turtle Islands as Indigenous to the Turtle Islands. People from Mexico fit everything on this list. This is what the UN recognizes as Indigenous people. People from Mexico fit these things. The Taino people fit these things. There are people from Mexico that I know who are connected to the Maya. Like, they have traced their ancestry. There's Mayan groups still active and still retaining heritage, and they're a part of those groups, right? So and Indigenous is absolutely also South America, PNW. I was not trying to indicate that it's just North America. But people in both spaces, you know, if you are a person who it can trace your ancestry here to the Turtle Islands or to Turtle Island or to Abiyala, which I'm probably still grossly mispronouncing, and I apologize, then you have indigeneity here, and you have the right to claim that indigeneity, to be a part of that indigeneity, to search out or connect to in what ways you feel are appropriate, right? Whether it's connecting to the earth because you don't have people around you that you can, a formed community around you, whether it's connecting to a formed community, you have the right to that. Not only the right to that, for me, it's about, to me, being Indigenous is as much about community as anything else. But to me, I consider community to be the biome as a whole. I don't consider it to just be human. I consider it to be the animals. I consider it to be the trees. I consider it to be the grass. So I personally feel that that's what we held on to so much longer here. That's what was stamped out of every other space. And that's what, that knowledge, that understanding, that's one of the things that we bring to the table to change what we're doing to this planet, to change the destruction of this planet, and to move forward as a humanity that is not harming each other, because that is not our way, and is not the Indigenous way. And I mean that for all animistic peoples that I personally know of, and being able to connect to the earth. I want to clarify something within that, though. When we talk about Turtle Island Indigenous people, we often get attacked with things like they had slaves, they were killing each other. This is a comment on one of my videos right now. that I have not had the time to make a video on, but I will be. When we're looking at that, we have to understand that slavery is a global thing. It is a change in thought process when we get to the point of some form of ownership. But slavery is a global thing, and what indigenous people had as slaves and what people in other parts of the globe had as slave pre-chattel slavery is completely a different thought process. It is the same thought process as indentured servitude, signing up to be a slave, getting enslaved in a raid where you earn freedom, like Quanah Parker's mother, different things along those lines. It is not ownership of somebody as a animal that is not only their entire life, but their children's entire life. So when we think of what indigenous people, and I mean this for groups pre-chattel slavery as well across the globe, what we think of as slavery is A, across the globe in some sense or another, and B, not the slavery you think of. So that is another one of those false equivocations. As for fighting for land, you and your cousins fight over shit. Don't be pissed, because my cousins and I fight over shit. We weren't off killing each other near as much as you. We're off killing each other. Sorry, kind of got sidetracked. Go ahead.
The day. At the end of the day, even if that were true, which it's not what you said, but I'm saying, like, even if what they're saying is true and it's not, that doesn't give the right to another people to come in and do what they did.
Genocide is completely different.
None of that. Yeah, none of that would have given licensure for another set of people to come in and do what they did. We were sovereign. We were our own nation, and we didn't do anything. And the way that they did it would have been considered the war crimes.
Absolutely.
They had to commit war crimes. And in doing what they did, they destroyed the land. They caused massive problems in so doing what they did. And they're continuing to do it. And we're concerned. As the indigenous peoples with the most experience on this land, we are highly concerned. We have chemicals and stuff, train wrecks, human crimes. We're worried even about the way that they treat their own people on our land. It's problematic for everyone, including them. If that ever did give licensure for someone to come in, then we have licensure to step in now.
100%. 100%. I think that goes back to that. Nothing is pan anybody. Like, nothing is monolithic indigenous anybody. Nothing is monolithic indigenous people. We see that as a species, and traced down to indigenous groups in the Turtle Islands, North and South America, when the Europeans arrived, that there is this love for other and respect for life that is the majority. And again, I want to specify nothing is monolithic. Trying to make something a monolith is ridiculous. But part of what I talk about when I talk about paleoanthropology and having that nurture and communal aspect innate within our bodies, like we must have to survive as a species, those welcoming, loving things is that I'm not just concerned about how you're treating me and my sisters and my brothers. I'm also concerned about how you're treating your kids. I'm also concerned about how you're treating the land. I'm also concerned about how you're treating other countries. I'm also concerned about the levels you're taking. It's this mass extinction that they have started, and they started in things like the buffalo, right? They started when they were trying to commit genocide against indigenous people here, and started eradicating the different, not even just species, but like plant life, like biome life, right? It's that mass extinction that they seem to have started without even giving a damn. Like, even when they're made aware, there's no give a damn, right? Even when it's in your face, there's no give a damn. And I don't want to see, on any level, I don't want to see hurt or harm or bloodshed or violence. I am totally a burn it to the ground person, but I am totally finding ways that I can do so in a non-violent way so that it can be done with as much love as possible. But I definitely and I definitely need to see a shift, because I don't think that we're going to survive. And for me, that's the key of why I fight for land back, because I believe we must return that tending to people who understand the biome and who grew enough with the biome to understand the deep level of the biome that it's going to take to heal the biome. And I know biome can be a word that some people don't understand. So what I mean is by like the entirety of who we, like the world around us is the biome, all the plant life, all the animal life, the us, it's all intermixed. It needs each other to survive, the circle of life. To do that, that's the root of it for me. And that's what I hear when I listen to you, and what I hear when I listen to anybody else is I need to see safety for everybody.
Right. This isn't about hating the white man. This is not about that. We have admixture too. Like, you know what I mean? Jesus. We're not concerned. We're concerned about how our people are being treated today. We're concerned about how our land is being treated, because we want it to continue on and thrive for everyone. Like, we're trying. It's like we're not messing with you. Let us have our people. Let us have our children. Let us have our peace. Let us have our land. You know, nobody is, I mean, there are people who are responding to being mistreated. I've been there. I've been mad, you know, but generally speaking, what I hear from my tribe and other indigenous communities out here is that we're just seeking a way to live in harmony. We just want to be able to continue on with our culture and carry on our traditions and have basic human respect. Right, like for the family's argument for ICWA, that is very disrespectful. We're a whole different religion, so therefore we're better equipped. What?
Right.
You know, that's like me coming to you saying, you know what, my family makes better food, so we're better equipped.
Yeah.
Like, dude, your food is just fine. You just use different seasonings. Like, what the, you know what I mean? It's highly disrespectful. It's literally telling us that we're less than. Like, we just want basic respect.
Right. And that on every level, right? On every level, that's all we're asking is just respect, to be seen, to be heard, to be understood. Or at least acknowledged.
And in a lot of cases, we will explain. We've been trying to explain for hundreds of years why we live the way we live, because we want y'all, in a lot of ways, to live similarly. I'm not saying we're inviting you into close practice. I'm just saying that we want you to respect the environment like we respect the environment, and we're willing to show you how to do it, but y'all gotta listen. That's all I'm saying.
Well, and again,
no, Cap. You know, some folks don't season food. I know, they took all the spices. Where the fuck did they put them? Listen. This is a problem for them. Like, I am concerned for them, because from what I did some research on these folks. Okay, hear me out. I did some research, and as it turned out, prior to the 1600s, these people had their own classifications, their own indigeneity where they lived, right? And they had their own gods. They had their own traditions. They had culture prior to that. And then they had their own seasonings, their own ways of cooking food. They did. They had seasonings. They had vegetables and different ways they cook stuff. What happened? When they took on that title of whiteness, that homogenization. It's like, everybody leave your spices at the door. No spices allowed in here. It was weird, dude.
It's that homogenization. It's that whiteness. That's why when people say white isn't a culture, I'm like, yes, it is. White is only a culture. Like, it's not even a skin color. It is a culture. That is what white is. White is a culture of plasticity, exploitation, and disposability.
Listen, if you're not going to use the spices, just pass them on.
This is real.
They're useful. There's some good stuff, and then they take them and then they up price them. They sell them for way more than what it took to get them.
Yeah.
Onions are not that expensive. Sassafras should not be that expensive. Sorry.
Yes, Miss Amber, the panel is Indigenous. Though my ancestors are. My tenuous connections mean that I don't speak over Indigenous people, and I do not want anybody to think that my voice should reign supreme. I come with an education that I was able to get due to a lot of circumstances and a very diverse background and upbringing. And so I try to uplift as much as I possibly can. But my ancestry is, and my upbringing is absolutely Indigenous. And yes, they are Indigenous as well.
Yes.
I know I'm not supposed to have to qualify. I still always feel I must, because to me, it's about being upfront and clear, because that's where the fault lies with a lot of people who are extremely light and trying to connect or have Indigenous ancestry, but not Indigenous upbringing or a closeness or things like that. And I also, go ahead. Sorry.
I'm just saying that if we can save ICLA, we need to start applying it to Southern Indigenous children when they come here too, because this is a state of emergency with that.
And I agree. So this is what I want to point out again. This is what the UN states as Indigenous, and pretty much everybody I know south of the Mexico-US border has some of these qualifications. I know some people who are not, and they will tell you that they are not. But pretty much everybody I've ever met from south of the border, I have family members who are south of the border origins, and there is a level of indigeneity, more cross-cultural, I think. Not cross-cultural, that's not the right verbiage. More of the population percentage has a level of indigeneity, I think, than most places across the globe.
Well, there's also the fact that language and culture grows with the time. And just to touch on, how do I put this? A lot of Southern Indigenous, their admixture with what would qualify to be white was a long time ago, and then they have reintegrated back in with more of their people. So it's like it's been a long time, right? That they are an accurate representation of their people today, because they are the people today. If that makes any sense. And that is valid AF.
Yeah, absolutely. In the trauma that's being inflicted is a level of trauma that we saw started here with the United States and the genocide within the United States and the United States government's genocide. Have seen taken to extremes overseas in Germany, and have seen mimicked in other areas to lesser extent. We are basically shoving people into concentration camps, for lack of a better word. Well, not for lack of a better word, for the most correct word of what we are doing, separating children and parents, many not getting them back, and losing children, right? And what was done to women at the border and I'm sure it's still being done, just being done in a less overt manner, just like it's still being done within Indigenous communities north of that border. The forced hysterectomies, right? Like, so what we're seeing is a repeat of past action and past tragedy being inflicted on another group of people, and we have to stop that.
Those are our cousins.
Absolutely.
You know, period. And like, I like to draw people's attention to the act of culling, right? Culling it's from when they would drive cattle across the Americas, right? Across the United States, and what would happen was those who were driving the cattle would get hungry, and then they would get on their horses and they would stir up the cows and get them very upset and panicked, right? And then that would make it easier for them to separate one of the little ones, right, that they wanted to eat that night. And then they would put the animal down in front of the rest of the animals, and then they would butcher it up, and then they would eat it. The reason that the herd didn't protect that one at that point is because they were so upset and so busy. Thank God it's not me, type of mentality. I find that the same situation is going on with our Southern Indigenous relatives, in the sense that they've got us all upset. They're attacking ICWA, they're attacking them, and we would protect them if we weren't already being attacked ourselves. And I think we need to ground ourselves, take a deep breath, and be more protective of each other no matter what. Don't allow ourselves to be upset. Don't allow ourselves to panic, and stand by our Indigenous brothers and sisters at the border, period.
Absolutely. I want to state, as I'm really cautious about who I bring up into boxes, because I have a problem with people yelling over other people. So if you have a voice in this
He's
and you
awesome.
want to say, oh, yeah, no, I invited him. I'm inviting a couple of people up. And if you don't want to come up with my invitation, please feel free to not. But if you would like to come up and you're somebody who I either know or can be, vouched for to some level, or is being respectful in chat, you're more than welcome. This is Indigenous Space today, so please keep it to Turtle Island Indigenous, both North and South America. People today, yesterday, we were doing something that was a little bit more of the European, and I'm hoping to have that broaden up in a time zone to include Indigenous groups from Africa and Indigenous groups from East Eurasia and from Australia soon. So, I've got a couple of creators that I know who are capable or able to live. I just have to get in their time zone. So we will be working on that. But this is Turtle Island Indigenous Space today. So you are welcome to come up and speak. And as we're speaking about borders, I thought Trey would probably be one of the best to speak on it as well.
for the invite. I'm pretty happy. I'm happy to be here with you guys and share space with you guys. With the border, what's going on with the border? Well, they're passing bias and racist laws like HB 17, HB 20, if I'm not mistaken, and Liberty 5. That's already been implemented in Florida. So that this is all pretty much history on repeat. Whenever something goes bad or the economy starts going bad, it's noticeable with Biden's administration, with Trump's administration, how they're in deficiency. Is that how you say it? But they're pretty much owed to everybody, right? So they have a habitual habit of blaming us for the problems of America, quote unquote America. And they always alienate us from our land. I mean, of course, respecting everybody's territory, but whatever is not a territory, it's our land. It's everybody's land, right? It's indigenous people's land, and it's under occupation. So with that said, they alienate us from our birthright to migrate from north to south and south to north. Uh,
They do exclude indigenous peoples from any kind of say-so, don't they, in politics? They make sure to do that, and I see it's intentional.
yeah, I'm trying to get in the zone right here. Excuse my delays, but so this well, first of all, this border is biased, right? Because we as quote unquote Hispanics or Latino have to fill prolonged paperwork and pay expensive fees. I know that I experienced that myself because I'm not a U.S. citizen, so I have to pay expensive fees. My dad's a citizen. He was born here, but you know, I have to pay expensive fees to reside here in this illegal occupation. And U.S. European uh, natives of Europe, don't have to pay expensive fees to cross that same border. They don't have to fill any kind of paperwork to cross that same border, and they don't have to make prolonged lines to cross that same border. But we do, right? So they cross those borders at will, and from their own authority and from their own legality. Something that they don't take acknowledge. They don't acknowledge our own legality here in this illegal occupation. They don't take in account our own judicial systems, our own government, right? They simply is because they say so, and because it's out of their wants. It's out of their wants and needs, right? But why don't they build a border in Canada? Well, because it's the same people, right? They cross those borders at will. If there were Mexicans in Canada, they would be wanting to build a border wall and have those same biased laws and requirements to cross the same border. Also, Euro natives of Europe don't acknowledge anybody's borders around the world. They go and invade Iran's sovereignty, Iraq's sovereignty. They build Bantustan in South Africa. They build reservations here in North America. They build concentration camps for Japanese. Uh, and they like to separate our families, but they don't separate themselves from their own families. But they like to do that to us indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. So that border it's very biased and it's very racist. Not only is it racist, but it messes with the environment, with the fauna, with the animal nation, with the plant nation, right? Because now the animals itself, as they have been accustomed to migrate, now there's a damn fence separating segregation there. So Europeans don't have that in acknowledgement. They like to build and segregate and mess with the animal nation, mess with the plant nation, mess with us indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere, but they don't do that to themselves, and it's out of their own authority. So it's racist to the extreme.
Absolutely. For me, it is literally all about the racism too. It is literally a furthering. So the U.S. side of the Mexican U.S. border and the control of the U.S. side of that border, I'm not sure about a whole lot of the, I don't know anything about the southern side of that border. I haven't been across the southern side of that border because of where I live. But the northern side of that border, the laws that they're using to control that border are the same laws that they have been using for people of the same heritage, culture, and or race, which race has been debunked. That is why I put, or race theory has been debunked. Culture and heritage and ethnicity still exist. They've been applying it to people of the same ethnicity since the foundation of their country, of the same spaces, and they're just continuing that. Go ahead.
I apologize. I'm gonna have to excuse myself. My kids now tell me that they need me to take them to work. I do apologize, but as soon as I come back, I'll jump back in.
Absolutely no need to apologize whatsoever, brother. I take care of your baby. That's always first and foremost. And if when you come back in, if you want to come back up, it's totally, yours. You're always welcome. Just let me know and I will invite you up.
Yes, ma'am. I'll be back. I'll be back.
Enjoy your drive and your kids.
And the truth of the matter is, he's 100% correct. We don't treat immigrants from other countries, Wahiti countries in particular, the same. We don't. They're by law. Okay, they're technically, according to the law, there's no national language, right? For the majority of us can speak English, right? But that doesn't mean that there's a law that's been passed that states we have this as our national language. However, they require them to speak a certain amount of English and to be able to pass a civics test to our way of running civics, right? Before they're allowed. And basically, to me, that says you're going to abide by this standard of living, this culture, this way. You see what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
Negating, put it before your own, which is really nasty to ask, isn't it?
It's weird. Like, we didn't expect other people to give up their cultures. Any of them to give up their cultures coming here. So why would we expect it to people who have been here the whole time, right? It's very problematic for me.
Yeah. It's just nasty.
Absolutely. Well, and the racism that is so steeped in with what is going on is so obvious and so problematic that it's accepted as much as it is. And it's steeped with so many words of, well, it's this, or well, it's that, or this excuse or that excuse. And the end result is the more they fuck around and find out, the worse it's becoming for our economy, the worse it's becoming for our peoples, the worse it's becoming for us. We have to, and I mean us as an entire, as the entire group occupying this space, right? Like us as a whole, entire group occupying this space, the worse it is becoming. And so we have to find a way to get it through the common perception that border is arbitrary, that the people that live south of that border and the people that live north of that border are family, that they all belong in all of this space. And I really think seeing people from south of that border as Indigenous moves that forward on a lot of levels. That recognition, there's so much lack of recognition that recognizing that Indigenous people still live north of that border anyways, right? Like there's so much of the, unseen, being in a museum, being, thought of as to have been part of history and not part of current. There's so much of that anyways. Seeing the indigeneity is both north and south of that border, and seeing the spread of that indigeneity and the amount of Indigenous people who are still here when we look at the entirety of North America, even before we include South America, right? When we look at the entirety of North America, the amount of people that are still here blows the ability to negate, to erase, to set aside out of the water, in my opinion. And for me, that's why recognizing it as an indigeneity, recognizing people from south of that border as being indigenous is such a huge, huge necessity to change perception. I get thrown. I don't do a lot of these lives like this where we're actually in conversations. I'm so used to like just doing teaching lives.
I don't know if did you see the poem that I posted about ICWA and the importance of it?
I believe so. I know I've seen a couple come across. Well, and I was searching through some ICWA stuff today too, so I've seen a couple of different things today. But I believe
we still have people alive today with PTSD dealing with the result of the boarding schools, which I really don't like calling them that. That's just a way to identify what they are so people know what I'm talking about. They were really concentration camps, right? And they were specifically for children, you know. Historically, when we see that the US government takes over a population and it has control like that, they haven't treated the people correctly. They haven't treated them like humans, as is evidenced in what we're finding on the grounds of those schools. This wasn't just a Canadian thing. This was, they started digging at US schools and they found them there too. This didn't happen like so long ago. There are people alive today dealing with PTSD from that, and then now we're allowing ICWA to be taken over. But for a moment, highlight the fact that ICWA isn't even followed in, as evidenced in the fact that this white family got this Indigenous child to begin with, or these white families had these Indigenous children to begin with. How did they get them? They got them by circumventing ICWA to begin with. Otherwise, we wouldn't be sitting here, right? We wouldn't, in court fighting for them to keep them. What do you mean you're fighting to keep them? How in the world did you get them?
Yeah. Yep.
And as proof that they're mistreating these kids, one of the women all over TikTok, I'm sure a lot of you have seen it. If you haven't, just look up Pancake Baby. She refers to her Indigenous adopted child as a pancake baby because the child is on the outside and white and fluffy on the inside. That's what she refers to the child. That's not love.
No.
That indicates that this child is going to be told their whole life in some form or another that who they are, who they came from, their very sense of self and their ethnicity is unworthy. That's abuse.
Well, and it's abusive to call them their pancake baby, period. That's telling them that what they are inside is better than what they are outside, and what they are inside is white and pure and pretty, and what they are outside is brown, right? And maybe burnt, or like it's already fucking with the headspace of anybody, any child. It would fuck with their headspace. Well, and
entirely inappropriate and abusive.
People don't often understand that the residential schools were closed in 96. And then there are some that were reopened by Indigenous communities, and the Indigenous community has full control over them. There are some that are still that are being nominally controlled by the Indigenous community, but the overall control is through the Catholic Church. There's one in Oregon today. So what people don't understand is that the overarching control of the 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 just like forced sterilization was supposedly outlawed in 1978, and yet I know plenty of women who were forced sterilized, just like the residential schools were supposed to have been outlawed. They still, in some cases, are still being ran by the Catholic Church and are still in action. Um, there's a little bit more control in the community over who goes to them. You know, it's not like you're getting your children yanked out of your hands all the time, but there are spaces they're still open and run by the Catholic Church with an Indigenous board or an Indigenous group of teachers. So people like to say that this stuff is in the past. None of it is in the past. Every single thing that we are talking of today is still happening. Still happening. And that's where I get really personally sad. And
this woman had the
yell.
unmitigated. I'm sorry.
Oh my good goddess, go ahead.
She had the unmitigated gall to call that child her pancake baby multiple times on the internet in a video that she wanted circulated virally. Like she wanted that. Like she's proud of it. That is evidence of the mentality that is out there. Like she felt comfortable saying that because she knows that there are so many people who are okay with it. This is a society that we live in. The evangelicals who stole the child who is now 10, and yes, that's stealing.
Oh, absolutely.
A child, had the unmitigated gall to say on court documentation to the Supreme Court that because they were evangelical Christians, they were better equipped than members of this child's own tribe to rear this child. They felt like, oh, surely they will agree with me because this is general consensus. I'm sure a lot of people reported this woman and nobody cares. It's really messed up, you know? To me, that is disrespectful towards that child's heritage. I think Humble Scholar, she's an expert in this field. You know, ask her point blank, objectively, not unobjectively, objectively, as a professional in that field, what do you think? I'd say that's abusive.
I'm not a professional in abuse field, but I've gone through a lot of understanding and training. I like I said earlier, I think it's flat out abusive. Like you're basically stating that the white fluffy inside is okay, but the brown outside is not. And stating it in front of that child is 100% abuse because you are telling that child who they are is bad. And anytime you tell a child who they are is bad, innately who they are is bad, innately, you are devaluing themselves in their own eyes. You are making it impossible for them to ever, it's not even never find connection to culture, because it's more likely that they probably will one day find connection to culture. It is absolutely, though, creating a sense of self-hate within them. And especially, I mean, I don't care how old you are, you're hearing that from a very early age, or even hearing that from a very early age, you're aware of what it is. You're aware of what it comes across as. You're aware that the fluffy white is okay like mommy, but the brown isn't okay like me, right? And so it creates this cycle of self-hate within the body, within the self. And that's absolute abuse. That should absolutely be reported. And I'm sure it's been reported. So we had a weird one a while ago when I was first getting into TikTok, which is not that long ago. And it was a man who had a boy, and I thought he had surpassed ICWA, but he had actually had the agreement of the nation to be placed with the boy, but he showed the racism online. And it was the videos from online being showed to the nation that had placed the boy. The mother had requested that the boy be placed with the person. And so the nation had respected the mother's request, sovereignty. So it might be that the way that they surmounted it is through the nation. So it might be something to report to the nation as well, just because it might be something that we find gets taken care of quicker through the nation, who will understand that better than any CPS or governmental will. Does that make sense?
Thoroughly, it does. However, I'm concerned that it's even up for discussion that the nation doesn't have ultimate authority. I don't see that. Like here's the thing, okay? We're sovereign nations. We are our own people. Okay, so like let's say we didn't like the way I don't know, Russians for raising their babies, right? Let's say we didn't like the way that they're raising their kids. Can we just like go over there and take their kids? Like, no, it's not appropriate. And it very much is a similar situation with regards to them taking Indigenous children. You know, we're sovereign nations. If you have a problem, you report it to our nation, let our nation deal with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, and that's what I'm saying. I think that if it's reported to the nation over being reported to anything else, that's going to have a greater effect. So, to my understanding, there are very few ways, to my current understanding, and I might not know all. I'm not saying I know all of it on any level, but my current understanding is there are a few ways that the nation placing a child with a white person circumvents ICWA, but it's still sovereignty for the nation, right? Like the one case,
Like facts,
right? So if the nation sees that this person that they made, that's the only way I know of really that you can circumvent ICWA. I don't know how the couple with the 10-year-old circumvented ICWA to get custody of the 10-year-old in the first place. To me, you'd have to break some laws at that point, other than having the nation agree, which again is that sovereignty aspect, which is extremely important and must be maintained. So I think sometimes, well, no, I know a lot of times that we think some white people are actually trying to do good. I know a lot of times that we think that some people, especially in a society that has this foundation in narcissistic behavioral patterns, to manipulate somebody's perception of them. I think a lot of times these children get placed with families that they should not be placed with because that family has manipulated the nation's perception of them, that they're a good, they're an ally, they're an accomplice, they're somebody who's fighting for the nation, right? And that's the only legal way I can see getting around. So anytime we're seeing something like that, it has to be reported to me. I think it has to be reported to the nation before it's even reported to something like CPS, just because of the fact that the nation should have outright sovereignty on it anyways. And they're, to me, the only ones who can really, in the best way possible, make any change to that.
I'm trying to keep up with the comments.
Yeah, I was too. There was a couple going there. I was like, I'm just going to ignore them. I'm just going to keep them down there. I saw somebody was actually dealing with some of it.
Right one. Humble doesn't need.
I know.
Humble don't even need help with that.
I figured, I saw, and I went, I'm just going to stay out of it. They got it. Let's watch her. Let's watch what she does here. This is.
Yeah, I love it. That was the wrong answer right there.
This is why I hate having to turn off comments in my lives when it gets like really bad, when I'm doing like educational lives and it gets really bad and I have to turn them off. I get so like I miss watching them. The comments can be so like, there are so many people that I know across this platform who are so well educated or so, and I don't mean educated in a Western standpoint, but so they know they're. And so, you know, I learned something today.
So I was like literally talking to this one time. I was like, okay, so there are people who claim things, right?
Mm-hmm.
They claim academic authority, and they don't demonstrate it. And then there are people who have done their homework and can prove it by demonstration. Like, Humble's so damn good.
Yeah.
I'm really going to tell you that I was going to use her to discredit somebody at one point because I was like, dude, because I can tell the difference, and I'm not even a professional in that field. You know what I mean? I'm just educated enough to know somebody's full of it. That's it. At the end of the day.
But the key to being
here's
a good
the
person
deal.
is understanding that I am just educated enough to know that I'm full of it. Right?
We're dealing. These are hard times. Not that times have ever been easy since colonization. I'm just saying that these are very, very hard times. We don't need confusion, right? And like, here's the thing: if other folks of other ethnicities want to get legislation in place to protect their children because they feel they've been mistreated, you know what? Honestly, we'd stand with them.
Yeah.
We see the mistreatment of other people. We know.
Absolutely.
You know, we're just saying we shouldn't be erasing legislation protecting kids. We should be adding more. Oh,
okay, so the minute you say that, the minute you phrase it in you prove that you're not indigenous to this space, because you're saying that you're not a member of the indigenous people of this space. The minute you put us, who are the indigenous people in this space, by all accounts, by all history, by all knowledge, the indigenous people in this space, the minute you put us into a category as other from yourself is when you yourself state that you are not indigenous to the Turtle Islands. Period.
Can you bring Humble up too? If they're going to come up, we got to bring Humble.
Oh, well, I haven't invited them up. I haven't invited them up
for a second.
You're not welcome to come up. You're not indigenous to this space. And today is being held for Turtle Island indigenous people. Unless you are Afro-Indigenous, as in the fact that you have indigenous ancestry, which is that you have indigenous ancestry and African ancestry. But I know that you're not, because you say American Indian and you say y'all. And you wouldn't be using either one of those things if you were Afro-Indigenous, and you are not welcome in my live, because this live today is indigenous people of the Turtle Islands, North and South America, and you are not.
And since they're going to Google, I just want to remind them, Google Scholar is going to help you a little bit better.
Yep.
But before you go reading Google Scholar, there's something I want to draw your attention to. You're supposed to have a certain amount of education or information to teach you how to read those articles correctly. And I'm not talking about just being literate. I'm talking about like understanding how they're written, what that really means, because it could be confusing if it's not really your field. Humble can help you with that.
Humble, you are welcome to come up. I've followed you back. Thank you so much for the follow. And I think I have to actually have you as a mutual for me to be able to. I'm not seeing where it'll let me invite you up. So, but you are totally welcome to come up. It might need a request or something. Let me see if I can actually. I don't usually do these because I don't usually do these. I don't have a whole lot of knowledge on how to.
Bring the big stick. Bring the big stick, Humble.
Absolutely. Welcome back, Trey. I know I've heard you referred to as other things. Can I ask what is your preferred name?
Me?
Yes, you. Sorry.
Oh, my friends call me Koshimiki with Lashley, but they've been calling me Koshi for a while now. So if you would like to call me Koshi, it's not correct. Koshi means sleep. That's what it means. Not what. But people cut it. But yeah, you can call me Koshimiki.
Was it Koshikwi was the first one, and I probably butchered it, but could I hear it again?
Koshimiki.
Koshimiki.
Goshimiki.
That works.
Yeah.
I'm big on names. I have a hard time remembering names, and if I am starting to pronounce it wrong in my own head, I will like have to double ask. But to me, names are important. So absolutely, Koshimikwi. I think.
Yeah, Quishishit. It's a military rank in the Mexican civilization. But so Yei Akat, that is my Tonali name based on the Tonalpowali, the agricultural cycle of what today we call the Aztec calendar, right? So that is more of a sacred name. But yeah, everybody calls me Kushimiki.
I might have to say it a couple more times and ask, but I will do my best. And I'll call you Koshi until then, or try. So, but thank you and welcome back. I hope you had a good time with the baby, kid, child.
Yeah, it was like a 2-mile drive. It wasn't that bad.
Nice. Welcome, Humble. Pleasure to meet you. I think I have seen you before.
I hope it was good. I hope you got me on a good day. Hey, Koji. Good to see you, brother. So I was simply trying to ask for context and intention on the use of the term y'all because it was used in a way to separate one person from others. And so I just was trying to not assign anything that was not intended.
Absolutely. I hope I didn't step on your feet in my response to this statement.
Not at all.
Okay.
It was written. Okay. Well, I appreciate your honesty at least.
Well, I like Tashina's point.
So, who are the original indigenous peoples of Turtle Island or the Americas? What is known now today is the Americas, then, if that's what you're concerned about.
Are you asking me?
No.
Oh, okay, perfect.
I know you know.
Oh, okay. I was like,
I know you know.
am I being asked to give the education part?
Huh.
So,
well,
you say copper colored rays. Which phase of the copper are you inferring? Because copper has many appearances and phases. So which particular application are you using? Are we talking about oxidized copper? Are we talking about burnished copper? Are we talking about shined and processed copper? Are we talking about aged copper? These are all very different shades.
I'm gonna get some popcorn.
I see. I found her on a good day.
She's never gonna lose her temper. She's even keeled the whole way. That's
epic. I lose mine too easily.
It's okay. I'll give you a minute. Just think it over. I'm always interested in the copper colored aspect of colorism. It's always interesting. Hey, Lala. Did they leave?
I don't know.
Was that it?
Did you get that?
Oh. I can't believe you two haven't met before now, Humble.
I'm not always on the I get in where I can.
She's awesome. She holds very educational lives.
I'm pretty sure
I don't hold them. I don't even have lives.
I'm pretty sure I've seen Humble's name, but I'm not sure if I saw Humble's name in something else or not, and that's why I know them, or at least know their name.
Well, of course it's meant to discredit, but unfortunately, copper comes in many forms. So that would be a hard step to take as a basic pronunciation system. I would like someone to point out who the oxidized copper is. That might be the Atlanteans and the aliens and so forth. You know, it's deep.
Oxidized copper is green, correct? Yeah.
Right. So that's also a copper-colored person. So
Statue of Liberty.
I would like to see that.
Some liver issues.
Some
Are we talking about the people in the Appalachian?
purple and green too
With
sometimes.
silver? Right.
I mean, not totally.
It might be inferring the people in the Appalachia who took too much of the colloidal silver.
The
and
blue
turned
people.
About them. Yeah.
Are they actually blue?
Yes, they are. Their skin
they're
turned blue.
Yes, they're
I
legitimately
need
blue.
to see a picture of that.
You can Google it.
Yeah, it's
Just
a Google
it.
Blue
You said
people.
people of the Appalachian Mountains?
No, look, Appalachian blue
A
people.
specific family. A
Yeah.
specific family has a condition to where they can't really process it or whatever. Their body holds on to it. Yeah.
They drank too much colloidal silver, and it turned their skin blue because it screwed with their not their metabolism, but the balance of their body, and so they can't. Their skin is blue.
Yeah, like a Smurf.
Yeah, it is
like a
Smurf.
Smurf, not even Smurf blue.
Yeah, I see them. I see them.
Like this.
They're
They're copper.
they're white people, but they're blue.
Yes.
Correct.
Interesting. But no, I think a lot of people when they speak about the copper colored people, right? They referenced whatever book that was in the 1400s or 1500s when they're talking about different people of different spaces, right? And when they say swarthy, copper colored, or whatever, they're talking about the people that they mention Negroids, and they also talk about people of the Americas also, which we do know that some people that we know tribes that are in like South America that haven't been touched by colonization are very, dark melanated.
Depending on where they're from, but yeah, generally, like darker than me for sure.
Yeah, so when they make that connection, they're saying, hey, dark melanated people are with the people that we're talking about. So when you talk about the people that are not dark melanated, that doesn't mean that they're not the same people. They just might be lighter because of colonization, because of Europeanized people have intermixed with those people.
We call that admixture.
Admixture?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's also important. Sorry.
It also comes into play when you look at people who spend more time indoors, than outside in the sun, such as older cultures, right? Previous generations going way back spent more time outside in the sun, so of course they would have darker skin tones. Whereas nowadays, across the globe, regardless of the situation, unless you're out in the outback, you're not being outside as much. So of course your melanation would be different. Just like when we see people in prisons or in facilities where they're underground for long periods of time, their exposure to the sun is reduced, and thus their coloring and their pigmentation is reduced.
Right.
That's also depending on how much melanin they have in their skin too, because like a lot of like African American people, when they're not in the sun as often, they're still right. But of course, when they go in the sun, they're a lot darker.
Well, I heard that there are actually like 3 to 5. I can't remember which one, but BGP knows. There are multiple factors that determine your base level of color. so to speak. And it's more than just melanin. There's like different types of melanin, and then there are also other genetic factors.
Like what?
Right. I'd have to ask BGP. I really don't know what those factors are. I'm literally just learning about this.
They are the expert on that.
But
it's like melanin. I haven't gotten to all the different melanin. I just know if you have melanin, you kind of go into something a little bit more. But I know that some white people have melanin, but you don't have as either the same type or the same amount.
Right. It's not even just that some white people, like every human being and many animals have melanation in their skin. What type of melanation melanin that we're talking about, and also how that manifests according to the genetic traits that you take on from previous generations. So some generations can skip, right? And you might have in the same family, you might have some people that present darker, some that present lighter based on the traits that they take on from their previous generations. The notions that existed in biology, science, genetics previously that there were quote unquote dominant genes has long been dispelled for at least 20 years. Okay. So it takes a while for that to get out into the public, for the general mass public to understand how genetics and biology works, and that there can be parents that are very light presenting and have a dark child. And it not only has it happened, but it's becoming much more common as all of humanity tends to mix more and more. We see more of that. And it isn't necessarily that someone that has darker presenting traits, whether it be eyes, hair, skin, what have you, are necessarily going to produce a dark or darker child. Some of them can produce light children. Light parents can produce darker children. You can produce children that have phenotypes that you haven't seen going back 8 generations. So all of these things are important to talk about when we get into the ideas of for lack of a better word, colorism, or notions that a certain group of people are only going to present a certain way, and what people refer to as phenotypes. You don't want to have that be your center for what you stand on as to justify what qualifies a person as a thing. Your culture is what qualifies you as an inherent tribal identity, not just how you present or how you look. There are many tribes that will adopt people into their tribes that have nothing to do with a line of ancestry, but because they take on the culture and they participate in the tribe they are adopted in and accepted as a member of that tribe going forward. And that is something that probably should be discussed more frequently, so that people can understand how tribalism actually works.
Can I pause you real quick? I'm so sorry. You're going. I'm listening. I need to kind of go back a little bit. So you're saying that we learned that in school about like dominant and recessive traits was not true?
Can I answer that really quick? And then I pause.
It's formidable years, right?
Yeah.
And in that study, there was an entire portion of genetic material that was literally labeled junk DNA, right?
I think they still have that, right?
Right, and it had to do with how the blocks on the chain regulated and were chosen. And science at that period thought that this was just kind of junk DNA that was out there, material. I'm trying to do layman's terms so everyone can understand. So it was considered not relevant, when in fact some of the most relevant material about how we understand genetics and the human genome was in what they were terming junk DNA. And because of this, they were using examples like humans evolving from monkeys and what they considered lower life forms at the time, and how there were so many similarities in the genetic strain of human life, right? And when they started to have the ability to break down what the quote-unquote junk DNA was, they found that the difference between an ape, for example, and a human was so vast that it was further apart than, let's say, a rabbit or a frog. And because of this, and because of the studies that have happened over the Human Genome Project in the last 20 years, there's a lot better and greater understanding about how our traits as human beings are passed down genetically. And that, yes, what we consider dominant traits are not necessarily dominant, because you can have people in the same family that will present a completely different way on the spectrum and yet come from the same parents, and they're legitimately proven to be of that line or that lineage. This is why it's important to have these kinds of discussions, because you can have somebody that has two parents who have very dark brown or black hair, and they can have a child that is blonde because generations back, that is in the genetic code, right? Just like you can have two dark parents that have a very light presenting child, because somewhere back in there is the genetic code. You go back far enough and we all share commonality. So every human being, every female, has what is referred to as an Eve gene that has the capability of producing every trait that is on the human spectrum. I understand that's going to upset people, but that's where we're at in science currently.
So I did hear a white tea person, like from like Europe, France, the more white tea areas, whatever, they can have a darker melanated person as a baby.
Yes, and it's happened. It's absolutely happened. Yes. And it's not only has it happened, but it's, like, for example, the gestation, the pregnancy has been monitored. So we know that these are the parents, and the child that was born to the quote unquote wife presenting or lighter presenting parents was in fact a much darker child. And to the point that, one of the parents said, well, I'm going to need a DNA test to prove this is my kid. Sure enough, it was. And yet that still happened.
Do you have the name of that study of the person?
It's not one. There are several.
Do you have where I can look that up? Because I would love to see this.
Sure. I will find it. Let me add you. I'll find it and I'll send you.
Oh,
I'll send
thank
you
you.
the entire thing. Yeah, they even did interviews and what have you. It was great.
I know that two dark melanated people can make like an albino baby. I know even with white tea people, they can make albino babies, but I have never seen the other
Not
way
just
around.
albino, but also just light skin without albinism.
Yeah.
Sandra Lang is a famous case in South Africa.
We all have the ability to produce the spectrum and all the traits within the human spectrum. Everyone. What happens is when you have certain types of information on genetic traits that present physically, the more that something is in the line, the more likely it is that that is going to be chosen, right, as a trait, because that's what the majority of the information would be. That doesn't mean there's nothing else in there. It means the likelihood that you will present similar to those around you is higher, because that's the majority of what is in those links on the chain, if you will. But any of them can be chosen.
And the lady's name was Sandra Lang?
That's a famous case in South Africa of a what they classified as colored, which I hate that verbiage, case in South Africa, a child born in that classification to two parents who had white documentation going back generations and generations. They were, Dutch invaders that have been Dutch invaders for generations on each side. And Sandra Lang was their daughter, and she was actually taken away from them. They had to fight for her so that they could retain custody of her because of apartheid. So it is something that has happened. And the latest studies are actually showing that the melanation of a person's skin is affected by the sun that the mother gets in utero when the child's in utero. So not like somebody that, might naturally come out, my shade is going to, Africa. And so that my child is absolutely going to come out like extremely dark. But that you're going to see children going darker or lighter by several shades naturally, depending on the amount of sun that the mother is getting when they're pregnant. And they've also recently really put a lot down into where to my understanding, they still think like eyes can be dominant recessive, but they've doubled down that skin doesn't have dominant and recessive genealogy or genes within it. It doesn't have to do with that. It has to do with several other factors.
So sun being one of them.
Yes. Not the only one though. There's a few others, and I don't want to know all of them, or I do not know all of them yet. I've been looking into it though.
Where's the so the one you just said about the
Sandra?
No,
S-A.
not Sandra, the other one. I mean, after you told me about Sandra, you told me about the study that they did about the woman in utero getting more sun and the baby coming out a little bit darker than the parents.
I have a copy of it. Let me see if that copy is up on my website. But that I do have the website that's in my profile actually has bibliographies for most stuff. I don't do a whole lot of conversation about that, so I'm not sure if it's up on the website, but I can get an article.
As long as there's a link, I can always go to your page to get the link. Thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I just wanted to point out that people like to often look at quote unquote science, which simply is defined by an observation or study of the natural world or phenomenon as we understand it, right? People like to use science like they use religion as a catch-all explanation for something. What people don't understand is as we learn, as our observations grow, as our knowledge and understanding of what is physical and observable grows, the definitions and the observations change as the information comes in. So things that would have been understood 100 years ago based on what was available, not only with technology, but with education, observation, etc., will be vastly different from what we understand today, in part, not exclusively, but in part, by the understanding of what we have available through technology, etc. So it is quite normal in every avenue of science, whether it be mathematics or any other field of academia, that as the information comes in, as the education and the understanding grows, so do the terms, definitions, and how we define things that we observe, that we understand, that we study. So it's not uncommon for science to have something 100 years ago that is no longer valid today simply because our understanding is different, right? And so to put forward science was wrong. Science is wrong all the time as they learn things. That's common. That is with everything. That is with philosophy. That is with psychology. That is with archaeology, cosmology, whatever it is that you want to put out there as a field of study in what is called the sciences of academia. It's always changing, including people who have degrees like MDs, PhDs, etc., where they spend a lifelong pursuit of that education. That education never stops. It's not like you receive the PhD and then you just stop. Your education continues on for the rest of your life because information is always coming in and you're always learning and you're always growing in your understanding. So yes, science is often wrong. Just wanted to point that out.
So what about history? Because I know when it comes down to history, you can only necessarily look at it from the standpoint of a person that lived during that time, but you can just add on to that by looking at what new stuff comes in. So do you just discredit what the people that were around at that time that we actually have information about? Do we discredit that information because something new comes up?
Personally, I discredit most. So history literally means written story. And personally, I discredit most written history and give value to most oral traditions. Most written history is propaganda written by the winner. And as long as we're looking at it without seeing it as propaganda, then we're only getting not just one side of the story, but a heavily biased side of the story. So for me personally, I take most of history to be looked at with a questioning eye. with whatever it says, and a questioning understanding of the biases within it. And in part, sorry, go on.
Does it still discredit what they're saying? Like, yes, it might be from their point of view, and like a lot of times, the history that we actually have written down are from European countries, but do we discredit them because of their racist or their one-sided idea of history, or do we just use that as a starting point to understand what was happening around that time? Because as I hear different people talking about different histories, even with oral history, it's still from from that person's point of view. I mean, it doesn't mean that those things did not happen. It's still from their point of view what was going on. It's like someone said, "Hey, I saw a monster."
Perspective is rooted from position, right? It's a perspective is rooted in position, but we need to keep in mind we need to look at this. We need to look at whatever happened from many perspectives if we have the ability.
Right. So one of the ways that we can kind of strip away the things that don't belong and hold on to the things that we can count as quote unquote true. The truth will stand up from all perspectives. So it doesn't matter where in history or from what vantage point, from what perspective it exists, it holds up from all of them. So we can look at the archaeological evidence and anthropological evidence, and we can say, well, we understand that in this time in human progression, this is what existed. It happened here, here, and here, or it only happened at this one location with particular people, and then try to gain understanding based on the information that is surrounding that and count what we can discard and what we can count and hold as true. The things that will hold up as quote unquote true or factual are the things that hold up from all perspectives, not just from one vantage point, from one culture, from one people, from one accounting. Does that make sense? Just like if we are going to count a witnessing of an event, you might have 10 people. They all have 10 different perspectives and 10 different accounts of what happened. The factual parts of that case or that incident are all the things that line up with each. And we can count those as factual and true. Everything else will be based on opinion, perspective, culture, observation, vantage point, what have you. And that's what kind of...
You cut out.
Might be additives or infactual, if that makes sense. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah. So what as people of the earth, where do we actually sit and say what guidelines do we have to go by to say, oh, this isn't necessarily fully factual and we can kind of ignore this or we can accept this? Because like you say, like everyone's oral history is going to be different because it's going to be from their perspective, just like history that is written is from different perspectives. And then how do you pick and choose which are true and which is not true? Because even well, I don't know if y'all know, but we know that people, like you said, propaganda, people put out what they want to declare a narrative on what they want people to think. So if they can have propaganda to say what they want people to think compared to what the actual truth is, how do we determine which one is the truth and which one's not if you only have one side of that coin?
I have a question for you, sir.
Yes.
What part of history are you challenged to have full understanding of at this juncture? Because we can go on and on, right? Like history was a long time, right?
Yeah.
But specifically, what? Because the peopling of what is now known as the Americas, that's already claimed. It's not unclaimed land or heritage. We have it. It's ours. Like, and we have many different people from lots of different places all over the world who have admixture with us. I get that, but like, is what part of history? Because there are many parts that can and should be challenged, right?
Mm-hmm.
What part are we challenged? What part are we challenging?
Well, for me, everything I've been taught in school, I want to challenge now, because a lot of things that we were taught in school were either half truths or just partial truths. Nothing was fully
Right.
truth, right? So then, as I cannot even say educated people that are thinking people have to kind of go back to what we were taught, what was their goal of what was said, and then also see what other people are saying around the world to kind of piece together what the actual truth is. Like, a lot of what are lies, there are partial truths. Like, they might be lying about one thing, but then in that lie, they're telling the truth in there somewhere, right? So, knowing that we have, like, me personally, I have to look at everything that has been told and what I can read and see from other people's perspective to actually get the full story.
Mm-hmm.
So
what particular lie are we referring to, or possible or probable lie?
So from my perspective, only part of history that I can really necessarily be interested in is the time between maybe as far as the 1300s until now, right? Because realistically, that's the only. That's
with
the only
respect to what?
Huh?
With respect to what?
In respect to either my history or the history of where I live, which is in the Americas.
Okay, hold on?
In
my
United
turn.
States.
I'm going to take my turn really quick.
Sorry. Go ahead.
So I think that I may have misunderstood you coming up. If you are trying to talk about the ethnocentric thought process, I believed you to be somebody who was Afro-Indigenous coming up. And I want to make sure that that is what we're dealing with here, because it's starting to sound like we're dealing with Indigenous erasure here. And I want to make sure that that's not who we're talking to. Huh?
We all agree that we have Afro-Indigenous people. We have people
Absolutely
who are both African and Indigenous, but the original peoples of what is now known as the Americas did not closely resemble West Africans.
That's the best way to put that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, I can agree with that. But I don't have an ethnocentric or Afrocentric or Eurocentric point of view of anything. I do understand your pause or trying to understand where I'm coming from, but at the same time, like I said, like, I look at history full on. I'm trying to learn and understand what we were told and actually understand and get the truth out of everything that's been told, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So ethnically, yes, I'm melanated, right? I've been told as a kid that everyone that's in the United States that are dark melanated people are from Africa, right? But then hearing other perspectives and even listening to BGP, she said, hey, there were people here that were all shades of brown, right? So knowing that, because I didn't hear that before, right? All the people I've seen were of a lighter complexion, right?
Oh, wonderful. So, are you questioning whether or not you're also Native American?
I don't know.
Oh, I'll tell you right now, you can go through, there are lots of people who would just be chomping at the bit to help you with your genealogy. You could. What's that? I think it would be wonderful for you to look into that and see.
It's simple. What DNA test? We'll tell you right away.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm actually currently looking more into my genealogy. I've been contemplating the DNA situation, but I also want to look at all the details and make sure that what I'm doing is actually factual, right? So I'm not. Right. I don't say that everything, if nothing is real. I take my time and look at all the facts and all the instances to get that right information, right? I don't just take information. Like, if you were to tell me, hey, there's no dark melanated people in the United States before Columbus came, I hear it, I take that information in, and then
did you see? Do you like Bill Nye?
Yeah, I love Bill Nye. I'm a '90s baby.
Okay,
I
so
hear from you a lot of melanated rhetoric. You know, you can't determine your ethnicity through this narrative of melanation. You can determine indigenous identity by what do you call it?
Skin color.
Melanin.
I agree with you.
No, but there is no I mean, it's simple. Like, it sounds to me like you're questioning even a DNA test.
I agree
Well,
with
don't
you.
base your whole rhetoric on melanation, because everything you're talking about is melanated this, melanated that.
Triscana,
It's like ethnocentric rhetoric, to be honest.
Triscana, I understand what you're saying. You have to understand that I'm from America, right? So as growing up, all I knew was Black and African American. I've only known things from a Black and melanated perspective.
okay, maybe
right?
we're going to give you the opportunity just to understand our perspective. There is a whole group out there trying to say that Native Americans are not the original people of the Americas. So we're very cautious,
Yes,
if
I
that makes
understand.
any sense. And
And you
some
do.
of the things
I
that you're
understand.
saying sound exactly like some of the people who come from that side say. They assume that just because they have dark melanin that they automatically are the original people of this continent, which is not true. And that's very offensive because it's an erasure of our people. And we've dealt with enough erasure. Now, if you are in fact a descendant of indigenous peoples of this land, we like that would be wonderful in our eyes. We have plenty of folks who are mixed with African and indigenous. That's great. But we need to, it sounds a little bit like them. He's right. Trace Kanya, he's correct.
But we are going to recenter this on the Indigenous experience. Today's live is about Indigenous peoples and holding space for Indigenous peoples. If you are working on reconnecting, we can give you information on how to reconnect. But we do want to make sure that the conversation is centered on the Indigenous people here in the Turtle Islands today. And so I would appreciate if we could make sure that we recenter that conversation and that we only have Indigenous to Turtle Island people in the boxes today. And again, we can help you reconnect if that's what you're trying to do. But just because that is today's conversation and understanding, I'm going to ask you to go ahead and step down, but do not take it as without love, because if you are looking to reconnect, I followed you back, so you and I can have a conversation. I can direct you to some people that can get you some reconnection. The modern science can trace our DNA here in the Turtle Islands, can actually show our DNA having unique actual species in it that we don't see in other spaces, and also traces unique mitochondrial DNA and stuff like that, and Y DNA. So if you do a DNA test, it will absolutely, like I've done a DNA test that actually connects me to Kennewick Man. You can actually like connect your DNA to actual like finds of people who were here in the Turtle Islands like 12,000 years ago. So if you would like to look into that, like I said, I've followed you back. Please message me and we'll help you look into that. But I do want to keep today's space about what it is to be Indigenous, what we're dealing with as Indigenous people, and what is going on as Indigenous people, with so much love and respect to your reconnection journey.
Yeah, and the only reason why I came up was I actually wanted to ask a question about the question that you had up, like the list of questions, the list of things that you had up, because like for the people that are like reconnecting, or the tribes that were either written out of history, or the tribes that were supposedly like what's it called genocided. I try to say it a different way so I won't get like
no, I get you.
Yeah, so with those tribes, how like the Taino, like they were seen as being done away with, but then they came back and said, hey, we're still here. So how do those tribes come back and actually show, that they are still here, basically?
Currently it would be DNA. Because like I said, so we have a ghost species here in Turtle Island, Indigenous people, that we don't see anywhere else on the earth. And it is a ghost species that we see in all Turtle Island Indigenous people, to my knowledge. We actually have Denisovian DNA here in Turtle Island, and we only have Denisovian DNA in Southeast Eurasia, so Southeast Asia, the islands of the South Pacific, Australasia, which includes the island of Australia, the Indigenous people of Australia. So if you are Turtle Island Indigenous, like if you made it to the Turtle Islands and you were one of those tribes that have either been detribalized or one of those peoples who's were not able to have a peoples come through the genocide, then we can still tell. We can still connect you through DNA to this land. So like I said, and it's on my website, the one that's in my profile, and that will give you DNA testing options, and it will give you spaces that you can actually take that DNA to see if your DNA connects to Turtle Island Indigenous peoples. But like I said, we'll help you reconnect if that's what you're looking for. That's absolutely down. But we are going to keep this space to people who are connected or not necessarily connected, but who are Indigenous. Connection can be at so many different levels today. If that's, if you can understand that, hopefully, again, with much love.
I thank y'all for having me up. Thank you for the panel. Thank you for all the gifts. Thank you for your time. And thank you for explaining something. There's a lot of things I've learned in this live, and I appreciate it. Thank y'all.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. I don't mean to interrupt, but can we please, whoever mods or regulates the chat, can we not use the term boy in reference to grown adults, especially if they are of a darker persuasion? That's really not okay and not appropriate in an intellectual discussion, which is what we're attempting to have. I'd appreciate that.
I'm not sure actually who I've got in here right now. I did want to throw this up really quick. This is Indigenous phenotype pre-colonization across the globe. You can get very dark here in the Turtle Islands, and you can get very light here in the Turtle Islands. But again, there is unique DNA here in the Turtle Islands. I do see a mod just came in. Let me see who else I have in here. I just saw you. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me up on the panel. I know everybody on this panel. I'm not familiar with you yet, but yes, these people on the panel are my mutuals.
I've been following you for a while.
You're gonna love her. She is freaking amazing.
Thank you. I'm trying to add a couple mods here, so forgive me for not being actually paying attention too much. Maybe.
So do we have? Do we just have like somebody curious about their journey, or was he attempting to infiltrate, or because something about just gives me the vibes of weird, I don't know.
Don't ask me. I'm always excited to find new family.
Right, and that's I like helping people reconnect, right? But there's just sometimes the vibe is not gelling. It's I don't know.
Well, based on the talking points of when she was disseminating were basically based on ethnocentric rhetoric. It's the same. Well, somebody that has dealt with that for a long time is, and I'm pretty sure you know it too. Humble Scholar knows it too. They're just more civil than me. I apologize for that, but I've been dealing with that for so many years that it's like PTSD. It infuriates me. But yeah, so he's basing the whole indigenous identity based on melanation, and based on false history. Right? He was trying to insinuate that DNA tests weren't accurate, that history wasn't accurate, that he's interested in the post 1492. I listened to every word he said, to the post 1492 history, and then going back and back and back to melanated rhetoric.
Yeah, that's automatic red flags.
Well, I had seen him before in
You
my
know,
lives without him
that's
doing
why
that.
I asked.
And so I thought he was
Well,
safe.
that's why I asked what part.
Right.
I said, well, what part of history are we looking to challenge here? You know, that's because it smelled like it to me too, and it was very disappointing. I'm just going to tell y'all, when you tell me you think you're Indigenous, like I get excited for you, and I start directing you to go do your genealogy and stuff. I might send you some good resources, some people I know who are good at that. You know, tell you to take a DNA test. You get me happy, and then you let me down when you turn into one of those. Like man.
What we're gonna do now, Cap, is from now on we're gonna put you on that height measurement that they have for the amusement rides going up and down. And because you're petite, it's probably
Listen, I must stand to the left when I smell it. Hey, I smelled it and I asked the right questions. I did. Although I was sad to do so, I did the right thing. And I just, I'll just pass out my free hugs over here. Damn it.
You were on top of it too.
I forgot what I was gonna say.
Well, I was in a live yesterday with the same individual, and he did give off the weird vibe. At the same time, he came respectfully, so that's a first. I give him that. But at the same time, when they start checking off those boxes of things that we normally would hear from that delusional group of people, then it may not be a good space for himself, but let alone everybody else, where we're just going to go in circles like always.
Absolutely.
Like to me, it's when I start questioning. You know what I mean?
It's when they begin to go down the path of invalidating our people. Because I hear a lot of people saying, oh, the Indigenous community is anti-Black. No, we're not. There are people with problems, right? And we're trying to address that. We're not going to say it doesn't exist. It happens. But this particular group is not saying it. They're not challenging that. They're just saying that we won't step aside and let them erase us. And if that's your issue with us, man, that's more than disheartening. That's upsetting, especially at a time like now, when we need recognition more than ever.
When you keep on running into lives like with the real goddess, whatever her name is, her chanting, like Indigenous of the Western Hemisphere, even mocking and even teaching his children to mock us. It's like you can't help but to be mad. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Sorry, I'm modding chat. I'm paying enough attention.
Tres Kanya, you've been doing this for over 8 years, something like that, for a while. You've been doing this for years. I just found out about this issue, right? And my first feelings were, wow, that's really sad. Can we try to connect them to, their own ancestry, teach them how to do genealogy, maybe, everybody. And then I saw that they were like, no, that's not what we want. We just want to erase you. I was like, what? And then immediately my thoughts went to my Afro-Indigenous brothers and sisters, right? I was like, oh my God, they're going to get picked on. And lo and behold, they were. It's upsetting for us because that's our family too, and they're causing problems for them, and I don't like that.
So
excuse me, hold on a second. Heavily Spanish mix. Do you know that the Spanish are like blonde-haired and blue-eyed? Spain is blonde-haired and blue-eyed. They're descendants of the Celts. They're very light of skin. People who you think are Spanish, coming from south of the U.S. Mexico border are actually indigenous people. So, nah.
Oh, I'm glad you brought that up. I do have a source for people that do invalidate Mexican people for their light skin. So there's this book called La Historia de la Nueva España, where Spaniards, when they were describing Mesoamerican people, a lot of those accounts, they were light-skinned people, even with beards and mustache. So if people want to read that story, it's called La Historia de la Nueva España. I think it's by Fray Duran.
Well, there is, I mean, everybody currently seen as Indigenous on this continent and on the South American continent by Indigenous people, which includes people north and south of any border that was created by Europeans, follows under everything that the UN counts as Indigenous. So therefore, they are Indigenous people, and there's just no discussion on it. Or at least no room for counter argument on it.
Yeah, the Portuguese were the seventh kingdom of Spain, so they're included. The only difference is, I would say, the Basque people of Spain are their version of the Indigenous and their continent, I guess. But because of I've seen in the comments, the people of southern Spain, because of their Mediterranean influence from the Moorish invasion for 700 years, a lot of them do not have blonde or blue eyes, have black hair. You know, they have the Mediterranean features, Middle Eastern. But Portugal were the seventh kingdom of Spain at one time before they broke off.
Well, and most people don't understand or don't know that Mediterranean is actually what Caucasian is. Like, that's the Caucasus Mountain regions, and then pretty much around the Mediterranean to include the Near East and the Middle East. These things are actually what is termed as Caucasian on the scale that terms who is what, the old racist scale. Caucasian isn't Northern European light skin. It's actually relatively dark compared to Northern European white.
Yeah. No printer. And just FYI, folks, just a quick reminder, what is race is a social construct. Y'all ought to look up Thomas Middleton, because he's the guy who popularized the whole white people term in a play. He's not a scientist.
I'll be right back.
He was a playwright. And it was created to justify the subjugation of other folks. You know, so like it grouped together a bunch of people who, from blood type to bone structure, they all worshiped different gods, ate different foods, had different customs and culture of their own, grouped them all together and said, now, homogenize, you are all one. No, they're not. They're not. The whole concept of race is just BS. It really is. Ethnicity is real. Race is not.
Exactly. Something that I like to disseminate a lot too is how we, and I'll speak like people in Mesoamerica didn't identify like with colors or with race. They always identify themselves as people, like Mexica, people from the lake of the navel moon, or Zapoteca, people from the clouds.
Well, the person who said that they're learning so much from me, they need to add each and every single person on this panel, because I know them all well enough to know, and the host, because they all know their shit and their intentions are pure and good. So add them, listen to them too. There's going to be a lot of stuff I don't know. Just what one of us doesn't know, the other's going to know. And if we can't get it, we can find the information for you if it's out there to be had. Yeah. Stir fry is another good one.
There's no reason why people can't find that information, like, unless it's from a biased source to support a narrative. It's free information for the most part, unless you're talking about individual tribal ceremonies or something that are closed off to the public. A lot of it is public information.
You'd be surprised how open a lot of tribes are to helping people find the truth, as long as what you're seeking is truth.
Right. And I don't see any more ethnocentrics in the chat, which is cool. But they're probably watching from the hallway. Yeah.
Well, maybe they can learn something and we can all come together and try to figure out how to set everybody,
Yeah.
I don't like the negativity. There could be so much that we could do with this app. Like, the lives that Widda holds are very educational. I've picked up a lot from them. We could do better. I really think we can all do better. And in that, we get gains, right? Like all of us, everybody.
I think that's a really important thing that strikes me most of the time when I see a lot of that thought process and that theory that erases. This is really the rhetoric being used to keep people down. If we were not buying into what the colonizing culture or the culture that ripped us out of a homeland is teaching us, is indoctrinating us into, we would understand that nobody else is getting better than you are. Like, it's not like somebody else is getting good and you're not. It seems that to me is one thing that I see happen across a lot of that thought process is, well, like the person talking about going to court to get their land back, and it's like, show us how, because it don't work. And the people that are out there thinking like, oh, you people who are indigenous get money and land allotments, and it's like, that's not how that works. Like, it's a totally different setup. It's not like everybody's getting a $10,000 a month check. There's nobody getting a $10,000 a month check anyways, but it's not like everybody's getting money. And so there's a lot of this thought process of being taught that we haven't done anything for you, but we've done something for them. And it creates this I can hate you instead of hating the person that's oppressing us both, right? And until we can understand that cross cultural need that we all have is to actually unify, to remove that oppressive cover, we're not going to be able to, I can't say we're not going to be able to, it makes it much harder to kind of stop being oppressed and being the way that we all are right now, right? Like, it's certainly not anybody indigenous who's preventing you from anything, and it's certainly the people in power.
So I want to use an analogy.
What?
Regarding their behaviors, right? And it just dawned on me.
TikToker. Look at what TikToker said. I'm sorry.
I've seen that. So in a relationship, right? In an unhealthy relationship, let's say the male is always talking bad to the female, right? And then internally she deflects that anger that she's been given to the child, right? So it's misplaced or displaced anger towards the child. And then the child grows up in school and starts bullying people and harassing people and misplacing that anger that was given by his mother to another child, right? And it keeps going and going and going. And that's why I see a lot of the ethnocentric ideologies is based on the oppression that they've been given over time, and it's been handed down to them over generations, and now it's being passed on to us due to their inadequacies and them not able to connect, or they're not getting the factual information, or they think they're one of the 5 civilized tribes, and because they're not finding the information that they think is going to suit their narrative, now they're taking it out on us, and it's not our problem.
Humble, aren't you North Cheyenne? Aren't you Northern Cheyenne?
Since birth.
What's that?
I said since birth.
Okay. That person's working security. Are you planning on going?
Am I planning on going?
They're having an event. They said that they're concerned that the Hebrew Israelites are going to be going up to their reservation.
It would be highly doubtful that would ever even remotely be permitted. It's heavily safeguarded, so that would be doubtful.
Good. Because I understand they did go to another reservation and were disruptive.
Yes.
I attend my local powwows just to look for stuff like that, personally. Just to be aware of what's going on and just in case if there's, they're bringing any drama or problems. At least I know I'm there, boots on the ground for the people.
Why do they keep going over to reservations of folks that are like known to be very good at protecting themselves?
Yeah, we protected ourselves against the U.S. government to the point to where they had to create treaties with us. I mean, that's not going to go over well. It's just going to cause problems.
Well, like the Cheyenne, they're known to be very aggressive. They're known to be very protective of themselves, of their people, of their land. Just like the Dakotas, like there's a reason that the largest mass execution in U.S. history was against Dakota people. So I'm just like, why are they going against the people who are known to be like the warriors? It's dumb.
That's not okay to even talk like that because these are people living on their reservations just trying to exist and have a life, This is where we're at, really, people? Like, really? Our ancestors were allies. That's not okay.
I'm paying attention. I'm just trying to fix something.
Can you hear me? I want to point out how our mood changed too. We were having such a good conversation until this ethnocentric order came about, right? Now we seem to not just talk about ethnocentrics and worry about ethnocentrics, and that's what they're meant to do. Is to just to get us in that bad energy, I guess.
Like we were discussing the effect of ICWA, what's happened with treaties, etc., history, and it got completely derailed.
So I didn't hear anything again today on ICWA. I looked it up. The closest I saw was an article a couple days ago. Has anybody heard anything?
Well, some states have already codified. They're just waiting on the remaining.
I think they're going to wait until the last session on July 1st to issue any ruling because they know how controversial it'll be. I think they're just going to wait until last minute.
Very true. And certain states who are proactive and they're going ahead and passing their own laws or assembly bills or whatnot to create their own version within the state, their own version of ICWA, just in case.
Yeah.
Right. If you go on to several of the organization websites that are rallying and doing the signatures for ICWA, you can find the states that have already codified, meaning they've gone on their own within their own states and made provisions written into law that will be protective of Indigenous children. They will also have a list of those who voted against.
I don't know what would have happened to me if it weren't for ICWA. That law protected me, kept track of me, not just connected me with my culture, but they physically kept track of where I was so that I didn't just disappear into the foster care system as a kid.
Yeah, it saved my niece from being taken to the country of Jordan or Palestine, one of the two. You know, so if I wouldn't have spoke up and gave my family the legal way behind it, being a paralegal, then yeah, my niece would have probably been somewhere with the head covering over there in Jordan, hidden from the world. And I'm not saying that to be, you know, towards Muslims, but you know, once a child is taken into a country like that and you're hidden with clothing, you can't find them. It's hard. All you see is their eyes. And we would never find my niece if that would happen.
Is anybody else surprised that Montana codified ICWA?
Jeez, really?
Yeah. And
That
like,
is,
that's where my tribe resides, is in Montana. And so, like, Montana is hugely anti-native. So I was very, very surprised to hear that.
yeah, it's pretty notorious for that too. So that's pretty surprising. Well,
I find it surprising that they want to take away from instead of add to.
it feels like they always want to take away from instead of add to anyways. Like anything that's going to benefit their structural process and the way that they are able to exploit the situation. We're talking about ICWA currently, Erica. Sorry, I was trying to say Erica right after ICWA. We're talking about ICWA currently, and the fact that it's currently a case in the Supreme Court trying to overthrow ICWA. Indian Child Welfare Act. Currently, it's Holland versus Brand something. Let me check out. Brackeen.
A lot of people really don't know the context behind that case. And it really comes down to a religious family or a couple, Christian people that want to adopt Native children.
They're so icky in the way they say it too. They think it's their Christian duty to take on these children and convert them and raise them in Christian homes. Like, that is what they have literally said. It is so disgusting.
Yep. And that's what it comes down to, is them thinking that they still have that authority complex, or whatever you want to call it, religious zealots, that they have to convert us into their way of life or their religious beliefs so that we can be saved. Like, it's insane. You know, it's grandiose thinking.
It goes back to the manifest destiny.
Exactly.
Which is why that was an important aspect for, you know, the Church of Rome to go and denounce that ideology. That's why that was important.
I need to clarify something really quick. So ICWA is the Indian Child Welfare Act, and what it does is it states that the nation has the sovereignty and control over where an Indigenous child is placed, and that they should not be placed outside of the nation or outside of their culture. And so currently what's being fought is there is an evangelical Christian couple who is trying to overthrow that so that they can basically denative the children, right? Remove their indigeneity. So it was put in place because for so long children were stolen from homes, sold to white couples, often for labor, and then put into foster care when foster care came into play, into homes that would take their culture away from them and change them. And it's very reminiscent, as mentioned in the comments, of the residential schools. It was very much to remove the indigenous knowledge from the child and replace it with white knowledge. And so it's a protection. It's protecting the nations from the government, and they're trying to overthrow it currently. Somebody didn't know what ICWA was, sorry.
So is anybody familiar with the Arlupa? which is the religious usage in the Indian Land Use Act, or Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Persons Act. I'm sorry.
No.
No. Okay, so that was developed. I don't know exactly. It was within the 2000s ish. I used it in a civil court case in the Ninth Circuit back in 2012 or 2013. So basically, like, it breaks down natives' rights that we have for ceremony or land use and who qualifies for it. Not just natives; it includes Hawaiians, Pacific Islanders, because they're all included under the other religious act that was passed in 1978. I'm having a brain freeze, but so that right there in itself, I've used that the Arlupa personally for religious rights that I was denied while incarcerated, right? And I think I'm hoping that whoever has submitted articles or paperwork or affidavits in support of keeping ICWA, they would have used this because it falls right under Arlupa, meaning taking the children to convert them out of their natural, out of our culture and our religious practices, spiritual practices as well, to convert them over to their beliefs, and that's obviously it's not right. So I would encourage everybody who's not familiar with the Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Person Act to look that up. There's a lot of good information on there for natives in general, for ceremony and what we have coming and what has been afforded to us from our rights being taken from us.
I'd like to ask Humble, I'm sure you won't mind me putting you on the spot here, but I just want your professional opinion regarding what it does to an Indigenous child when their heritage is so disrespected, in that the foster mother who called her foster baby her pancake baby, and when there's public record of the Supreme Court case, which I'm sure when that child grows up, if they haven't already been told by their adopted family and church and whoever that it was better for them to be raised by evangelical Christians, et cetera, like what that does to the kid objectively, because and its effects on the public, like the fact that they can be so proud as to utter that for everyone to hear and to write it so everyone can see and shout it from the mountaintops that they are more qualified. Their way is better to raise a child. Comfortability level of everyone to just like that they know that everybody is going to agree with them so much that it's going to be okay that they even say that out loud.
So if human beings, based on understanding and study and behavioral aspects, like if we understand that between the ages of 1 and 5, the id develops the sense of self, how we perceive ourselves. If in that stage a child is devalued to the point that they regret the existence that they have as they are, it is an ongoing, lifelong struggle for that child in a multitude of ways. You can't even quantify it, how that's going to play out for the child. We're going to include culture, the sense of tribalism and community that you get, etc. It's unfathomable the after effects that can have for a child, regardless of what ethnicity or cultural background they come from. Stripping someone away from all that they know, even if it's in someone on walkabout in the regular society, right? So let's say it's a white couple and they adopt another white child from middle America, right? Stripping them away from their culture down south and moving them up north can have devastating effects, and that's just regular, everyday American citizens. Because everything that they come from, everything that they know, they have no connection to. So it would be even more so when they are then taken out of their tribal cultural aspect. They have no sense of language, belief system, etc. and put into something completely new, and then also simultaneously ingrained with the notion that what they're placed into is better than what they are. It goes across the grid regardless of what the background, spiritual, cultural, ethnic, whatever. It's devastating to a child. It's devastating to a child that's above the age of 5 and while still in their formative teenage years, when they start to break away from their sense of self and independence and finding their own place, their own voice. All of this is devastating. This is a commonly known and understood thing. So to have the argument that is presented by whatever couple is coming forward, regardless of their cultural background, to infer that that is somehow a better option versus trying to find something within a culture that that child is already a part of, we have no way of measuring how badly that's going to affect that child by having that disconnection. And we can see it playing out presently in my social circle because one of my mom's best friends has a daughter. The daughter is mostly white presenting, etc. And her husband, who is also white, adopted a native child out of Canada, out of British Columbia. They were told at the time that the child was experiencing abuse, etc., because the mother had an addiction to alcohol, etc., drugs. The problem with that notion is what commonly happens to Indigenous women and men in particular is that we have governmental institutions, which can include the reach of, the medical community, that will place and assign certain behaviors or reactions which might be as a result of trauma and not necessarily addiction. They will be questioned. They will be assumed to be addicts of some sort or have some sort of behavioral, issue, mental health issue that would quantify or warrant the child being removed from the home. And they'll use that as an excuse to take the child away, regardless of whether or not those allegations or problems have been credibly established and documented. And that will be the excuse for them to then take the child and place it with someone else that's not needed. It's not something that just happens in Canada. It happens in Mexico, it happens in the United States, and it's very common and it's unfortunate. Just like you'll have children that are birthed and then removed at birth from the mother with the allegation that the mother might be, inebriated or chemically altered in some way, and that justifies taking the child, even though no test has been given to prove whether or not they actually have anything in their system. And by that time, the parents, who more than likely don't have the resources or the knowledge or the understanding of how to go about the system with the U.S., they will take the child and place it in the system and thereby make it next to impossible to get the child back out because they've already been placed in foster care or they've already been placed with, someone else in an adoptive agency, etc. This is commonplace and this has been happening for hundreds of years.
I'm happy to, sorry to interrupt you, Humble, but I'm happy to drop so Birdie can come up because they want to talk about ICWA from the foster parent side. But I do want to just interject super, super quickly because you made me think a way that YT people can understand this is if your parents made you move while you were a sophomore in high school, how detrimental was that to you? Like that, I think that's the only way that we can make them understand. Like it ruins a kid's psychology by pulling them out of the only thing that they know, and putting them in a brand new environment, and then pulling somebody who's already in the foster care system out is the same as pulling somebody who's already deep into conspiracy theory, like all of that, those electronics out and back into normal society. It's pretty much impossible.
not any plans to reunify or anything and just drop them out to white tea people across the nation or wherever they can. There was like campaigns, almost like commercials. I remember it like when I was little, oh, everybody wanted to adopt a native kid. It was kind of like a trendy thing to do. I'm going to save this child from their, S ways of, not having gods or not having electricity or whatever it is, what they think of us. And so it was a very trendy thing to happen that was very detrimental to our people. And not only the children, these children are growing up in these homes and not looking like the people that are around them, not knowing who they are, and later seeking that out as an adult and having to deal with all that, just trying to piece it all together. But also the families, the community, to have these children just ripped away, and this is like post boarding school period where that already happened. We already had our communities, sorrow, just being no children, just the elders there. And it's so important to keep it intact.
No, these are powerful words, and they matter. Genetic mirroring. They have a name for it, right? We seek it. I remember being 18 years old, just a wee younger than the photo I have as my picture here, a few years, and I was working for the Conservation Corps, and there were smoke jumpers that came. Like, we were handling like the food and ground support, we weren't fighting fires, but there were smoke jumpers that were coming in. There was this really badass woman, she was out there with the guys, and she was a smoke jumper. It was really rare to see a smoke jumper. And she was Indigenous, and there weren't a lot of Pawnee around Southern California. There were a lot of Mexican Indigenous, not a whole lot of Pawnee. And I just kept looking at her face, just like, wow, she looks so familiar. Like, my sister kind of looks like that, my mother kind of looks like that. And she caught me looking at her while we were washing our hands, right? And she pulled me over, like physically pulled me by my shoulder, and pulled me close. She says, "You're Pawnee." And I was like, "Yeah, how'd you know?" She says, "I'm Pawnee." And she touched my face, and I'll never forget that moment of genetic mirroring and looking at her and just like, wow, yeah, our people are still here. We're out there. We exist. And to see that she was such a badass, she was one of the very, very few women out there fighting that fire in Kern County. I'll never forget it. It was amazing. She was an awesome woman, and that was a beautiful moment. We seek that out, and a lot of these kids don't get that opportunity when they're taken away from their people.
But that was the design behind it to begin with. When more of us will understand that there was an edict is like an order that's placed into law, but it's not on the books as law. Nowadays, we have executive orders, right? So if we understand that there was an edict that was placed into law that used the terms eradication and extermination of at the time the legal term was American Indian, that law, that edict, has never been rescinded. It is on the books to this day. So instead of them using residential schools and the military and the churches to come and take the children out of the homes, they use CPS and Department of Human Services, Social Services, etc., to exact the same end, right? So that edict has never been rescinded. It's never been revoked. It's never been walked back. It's never been altered. It still exists to this day. And as long as Indigenous people understand that, they will not be mystified at how they get away with doing this. Because it's still
I mean, the government, the U.S. government, equity, they still want us to be assimilated. They still want to have us assimilate, have us not be American Indian, Native American. You know, they don't want that political responsibility for us. You know, so that way they can access they can access the resources. They can, you know, not have to provide, you know, the medical and all the different things that's written in there that they're supposed to be doing. And so, you know, to this day, if we are not actively, as a community, as a tribe, as a people, as a family, as an individual, whatever you're at, trying to stay connected, trying to like fight every single day, then we're falling into that assimilation and going to be harder and harder to pull up ourselves up and out. You know, not unfortunately not all. That's why I say depending where you're at. Sometimes it's individuals. There's people out here that are American Indian, Native American, Indigenous, that are individuals that are not connected to a broader community, don't have a family that's being supported. So it lies on that person to seek it out. You know, those of us that are connected to a larger community or even to our tribes, you know, we are lucky to have that connection and to keep it and make it stronger, be active, you know, and, you know, really put these stories out, which I'm really glad to hear these things. And getting the truth out there, because most of America, like general public, does not know true Native American history. So they don't understand, why is ICWA even in place? Why do they get to be special? Oh, ooh, they're special. Well, what do they need it for? They don't need it. They're just like us. You know, they're just, you know, doing this or that. They don't understand the history because it's not being taught. It's not being talked about. And so they don't know. And unfortunately, right now, the money that's backing to try to dismantle ICWA is some big money. You know, so their voice is going to be very loud. And I've seen it happen here in Los Angeles with one of the ICWA cases. They had someone jump in that had big money, also backed up a family, and also another non-Native family that knew from the get-go that this child cannot be adopted by them, by that family, told by the get-go, yet they still tried to adopt that child. And then they had the lawyers that come out with the big money to really push it. That ended up, I think it was like it took the child 3 years to be placed with a relative that was there from the beginning, a concurrent planning as the backup plan if the parents could not take the child back. This relative was there ready and waiting to take the child, yet that money kept on pushing holding it up in court for like over 3 years. And then they made this big media thing about it, like, oh, the child's already attached. Yeah, you know what? The child probably is attached at that point. But if they had upheld, you know, ICWA from the beginning, because ICWA, you know, is in place, but a lot of times it's not being handled properly. So it's like we need more ICWA advocates out there too to help these families push it along, make sure that you're getting all the different protected services that are listed under ICWA for your children, to see that reunification, or if that reunification is not going to happen, that you see your child placed within the tribe or within the Native community. Otherwise, somehow, you know, these type of things seem to happen quite a lot. And the more it happens, and they're like, oh, well, they're just functioning great without being connected to the tribe. They're doing great. You know, let's get a psychological profile. Look, they're doing good. But we don't know what they're going to be like when they become adults. I guarantee those children are probably going to be asking, like, well, why didn't you just let me go back with my family? You know, my uncle was waiting, or my auntie, or my grandma, or whoever. Why didn't you let us go back to be with our people?
I need to interrupt really quick. I am.
I just wanted to say thank you for sharing your story, Ash, and I understand your anger.
Thank you. You guys want to say one? Of course. No, go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, if we could have the conversations in Indigenous spaces discussing the progression on Turtle Island on this continent and the span of 750 years, our first invasions being in the 1320s and spanning all the way into the 1900s and continuing on today. And depending on the region of the continent that people lived in or inhabited indigenously, originally, the experience that those people in that region would have would be entirely different from another region, from another area, from another coast, because the time period was spanning over hundreds and hundreds of years. So, so for example, to our southern brothers and sisters, that started from the 1300s to the 1600s and up into 17 and 19. This is a span of 500 years just in that time frame. Whereas on the East Coast, the invasion of others came between the 1500s into the 1900s, etc. Whereas the Plains tribes people, or the people that would be in what we now call Middle America, would have been a completely different experience because our invasion started in the 1700s. So because those time frames span such great long distances in time, the experience of colonization is inherently and distinctly different. So to treat it as a pan-Indian, meaning all-encompassing invasion of our continent, needs to be acknowledged, embraced, and appreciated so that we don't devalue others. We don't invalidate their experiences because they're different from our understanding of colonization, because it didn't just happen when America became America. It started well before there was an America. And it's continuing on all parts of the continent to this day. If we could just get that simple understanding, that would help us unify and not invalidate other people's experiences about colonization and not look at them because they don't have certain types of tribal records or because they have mixtures from other groups of people and invalidate them as if they're not equally Indigenous. We have to stop doing this to each other. We have to stop invalidating the people that were taken away from their people and then brought back and treating them as if they're not equally Indigenous just because they didn't have the privilege, because yes, it was a privilege, to remain with their families and their people, and then seek to invalidate them because maybe they don't have the same understandings culturally, etc. We've got to stop doing this to each other because we are weaponizing everybody that's coming at us, and they're all coming for us. So we need to not do that to each other and treat each other with dignity and respect, because if nobody else does, we should be doing that for each other.
I need to interrupt everybody really quick. I have to take off in like 5 minutes. To my understanding, the live will still stay going for a while. Please stay up and hold space and continue. I will be doing this again next week. And yesterday we did an Indigenous Peoples Live for people in other continents, Eurasia, Africa, Australia, so that we can see that global fight that's going on. And because for me, Land Back, it must be for everybody to be for anybody for it to really work. So we will be holding that again next week as well, but we will also be next week holding a space that is Indigenous to Turtle Island voices, speaking about experience here and about issues that need to be looked at here. I do have to take off, but like I said, well, at 6, so like in 4 more minutes, but like I said, this will keep going. I'm going to say goodbye now so the conversation can continue while I pop out. And thank you, each and every one of you, for coming up and sharing your stories and for just the love that you are giving all of us and everybody who is listening to that love and taking that understanding and broadening their perspective. I very much appreciate that.
See ya. Have a good one.
Thank you you very much.
Yep. I always appreciate you.
Thank you. And I got Wagon Burner to see me. I've been trying to get that for like months. I just have to say, never mind.
I think a lot of us really need to be more accepting of those who are obviously Indigenous, like our Southern brothers and sisters. We are one. And, you know, I've told a lot of people, you know, at the end of the day, we have a common enemy. And